I mean, even, one of his family said to me that they didn't want to go to the wedding. It was the last place on earth they wanted to be, but they went there for Jason. They knew it wasn't going to work out.
And Tom Martens was there, obviously, and her mother, Sharon. And Tom Martens was dismissive of the Irish and was sort of almost racist.
Yeah, that comes across a lot right from the beginning in his police interview. But even at the wedding, he's like, Jason had paid for everything. He paid, he bought the house for about 340 grand. He bought Molly a 20 grand car. He paid 45,000, I think, for the wedding. They got married, ironically enough, in this place called Bleak House in Tennessee. And Tom, he looked down his nose, not just on Jason, but on the Irish in general, and you saw that after the killing where, he came out with all of these bizarre claims that Jason was an MMA fighter like Conor McGregor, and that he was like crazy drunk on the night. No, he actually, the toxicology tests, even though he had a few beers that afternoon, he wasn't even a quarter of the drink drive limit. Yeah. So, and he used terms like, it was a big Donnybrook. And I remember the sheriff said to me, we actually had to go off and Google what Donnybrook was, and then we discovered it was just all the fighting Irish in Dublin. So he was deliberately using these kind of Irish drunken stereotypes when, Jason didn't drink any more than the average Irish person. Even Molly would talk, in her police interview, talks about Jason being this mad binge drinker because he used to go out on a Friday night in Ireland after work and not come home until 1 o'clock. That wasn't that unusual for people in their late 20s.
And at this point, of course, she's taken him away from all his friends. He doesn't have really a properly, a social life other than we do here. There's kind of parties with the neighbours and that sort of American barbecue lifestyle that they have. She, after the wedding, she homes in on those kids big time, doesn't she?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was her intention, as we said, from the very beginning, was to take Jack and Sarah from them. So she, as far as I'm aware, actually consulted a lawyer before she got married to say, if I get divorced, what are my custody rights going to be?
Right.
So, and from the very... She maintained and Tom maintained that it was meant to have been part of their wedding ceremony that Molly would be allowed to adopt Jack and Sarah on that day. Now, that's disputed. But in any event, it never happened. And Jason, they do appear to have been relatively happy up until about 2012, 2013, for the first couple of years of their marriage. And funnily enough, I got access to some of her medical records, and that's the period where you can see she's regularly getting prescribed her bipolar disorder medication. Right. She's staying on the medication, and it stops around the end of 2012. So naturally enough, she starts to spiral. And that's when, originally it was kind of thought that it was only about a year before the killing that she was going around spreading these rumors about domestic abuse of the neighbors. But the book actually shows that she was doing that from early 2013. So her intention was to marry Jason, divorce him, get the kids. But to do that, she had to be allowed to adopt the kids. And because of her, crazy behavior at times, and because of her bipolar disorder, Jason was, he was worried. He didn't want to do that. And he actually goes, it's in the documentation I have that he goes, or he sends an email to a lawyer in the States, and he says, look, is there any way of framing an adoption agreement so that, I can't possibly in any circumstances lose custody of Jack and Sarah? And they said, no, if you allow her to adopt, there is a good chance that the judge could give custody of Jack and Sarah to her.
So he's not going to do that.
So he doesn't do it. And this is a constant source of friction right up until Jason's twin, Wayne, visited Jason and Molly in the States the week before the killing. And they all went to Washington, D.C. Sharon was there, Molly's mum. Tom refused. He said he had work commitments, even though he didn't work at the weekend. And while on that trip, a week before the killing, Jason overhears this Molly's mother and Molly's aunt talking about how everything would be okay if Jason would just let her adopt the kids, and how to have this college fund set up for Jack, and he needs to allow her to adopt. And Jason shut down the conversation and said they were his kids and this wasn't the appropriate place to be discussing it. But so the adoption thing is right at the heart of it. And when she starts to realize that, look, he's never going to relent on this, he's never going to let me adopt him, she starts spreading rumors about domestic abuse with the neighbours. But she gets her inspiration from a few different areas. But one of the things is she goes to this woman who was in the book club with her in Meadowlands, and she was a family lawyer who kind of specialised in particularly contentious child custody disputes. Her name is Melissa Sams, and Sam says to her, "You've no rights. If he won't let you adopt the kids, you've no chance. But there's only one avenue open to you, and that's to get an emergency custody order. And to do that, you have to be able to prove domestic abuse, or that he's a drunk, or that he's abusing drugs. Anything that you need to be able to show the judge the home environment isn't safe." So Sam says to her, the best way to do that is to record him, put secret recording devices all around the house, because that will be very persuasive in open court for a judge. So she does that. And I actually discovered that she had been secretly recording him before she even consulted with Sams. But the detectives believed that it was Sams who showed her there might be an end game here. You might be able to get an emergency custody order.
And we hear some of that recording on the Netflix documentary, and no doubt you have written about it in the book. But that A Deadly Marriage, both are called. But it feels as if the recording that we hear is that he's legitimately kind of saying, "You didn't let me have my dinner with my kids," kind of thing. You feel for him, even though he's getting a little bit frustrated, you can almost understand it. And was that the best she could get?
Well, that's the point, isn't it? I mean, the district attorney estimated, she goes to see this woman, Sams, in January of 2015. So it's 8 months before the killing. So they estimated, we know that she had secret recording devices in the bedroom, in the ensuite bathroom, in the living room, and in his car. So they estimated she had probably about 150 hours of secret recordings. They got less than 2 hours. They were given 2 tapes. One of them was called a shower tape. And basically what the detectives and the prosecutors said to me was, if you're recording somebody, you orchestrate the conversation. You're the only one who knows it's been recorded. So in the first one, which is called a shower tape, it's obvious that she's trying to provoke him, and she says something about, "Oh, you hit me around the head." And he goes, "Oh, yeah, sure. And like this woman, Melissa Sams, thought this was highly significant, that he didn't go, "What do you mean you hit her around?"
Yeah.
But he was so used to her dramatics and her accusations. And remember, go back to, the email a week before they get married where he's saying, "Stop hitting out, stop pushing," So he's obviously used to her, flying off the handle. So the lead detective in this is a very interesting woman called Wanda Thompson, and she said, that shower tape doesn't mean crap to me. She said that there was nothing in it. And the second tape was called the pancake tape, and this was kind of a row over the living room table at dinner time. Jason has he worked really hard. He worked long hours, a lot of travel. So he was constantly calling her because, she would disappear and leave the kids on their own, or so he was, and because he was conscious of her mental health struggles, he would ring her throughout the day just to make sure everything was okay. So he rang her on this day, and he said that he wanted to have dinner with his kids. And when he got home, then she had already fed them, and there was this sort of, ridiculous sort of, just a husband and wife squabble, Now, he does raise his voice. He does shout at her. Sarah does, scream, stop shouting. He does slam a kitchen chair, but that's the extent of it. There's no physical violence. He doesn't. And the way the detectives assessed it was, look, show me a married couple who haven't raised their voices to each other at some point. I can't go around arresting every husband and wife who have an argument. So despite her putting all these recording devices all over the house, that was the best she could come up with. But one of the really intriguing things that comes out of the book is she put a recording device in his car, and Jason got the impression he was kind of alert to the fact that she might be recording him in the house because she seemed to know about his conversations with his family. So he developed this practice of only talking to Paul Dillon, who was his best friend, while he was in the car on the way to work. And Paul told me about Jason telling him one day that, he had a plan to come back to Ireland if things got really bad. And Paul is absolutely convinced that this conversation took place in the car because the GPS came up in the background and they had a big kind of slagging match about, you still need the GPS after 4 years in America. But the significance of it was that Jason said, Molly is crazy as ever, but I have a plan. If things get really bad, I'll bring the kids back to Ireland, then I'll go back and divorce her, sell the house.
Right.
So about 3 weeks before the killing, again, the time isn't exact, but this is what Jack, Jason's son, that's the date he puts on it. Jason asked him, to clean out his car, and he gave him $5 to clean out his car. So when Jack is cleaning out the car, he finds this recording device under the front passenger seat. He gives it to his dad. There's kind of an angry, just an oral confrontation with Molly. Jason drives off with Jack and Sarah, and he says to them, how would you feel about moving back to Ireland? And Jack says, without mommy? And he said, yeah. And Jack was all for it. Sarah wasn't. Sarah wanted to stay. But the significance of it is that Jason not only knew that she was recording him, but he knew that she had quite likely had overheard his escape plan.
Push his plans forward.
Yeah. This is 3 weeks before the killing.
This is as he's saying to his friends, get to the worst case scenario. This is what I'm going to do. He's now at worst case scenario. She's recording him in the car as well. Yeah,
and he also knows that she might have overheard that.
Yeah.
So she's heard him say, she's crazy as ever. I'm going to bring the kids back to Ireland first, then come back and divorce her.
Does he at any point kind of realise, so she's desperate to adopt the kids and all the rest of it? Is he talking to his friends around that? He's obviously scared for the kids more than himself.
I think for at least, they seem to have been happy enough for the first year of their marriage, but I think from early 2013, they were having constant rows, and he was never going to let her adopt the kids, And he had said to his family back in Ireland, that once Jack gets to secondary school age, he was 10 at the time of the killing, I'm going to move him back to Ireland. And he had said that to his first wife's parents as well, that his intention was that Jack and Sarah would go to secondary school in Ireland. So, and even in the early emails around the marriage and stuff, he says to her that I'll do it for 5 years. But his intention was never to live the rest of his life in America. So I think he knew if he's discussing with Paul, his best friend, a few weeks before the killing, that Molly's as crazy as ever and he's got an escape plan, well, clearly things are bad, Yeah. So Molly finds out about this, and what the detectives think happened what happened in that bedroom, they don't believe that Molly intended to kill Jason that night. What they believe is that she intended to provoke what they called an explosive incident. She basically wanted to have a huge row with Jason while her father was in the house, so that she could take the kids, go to Tennessee, apply for an emergency custody order, use some of her recordings, but also have Tom, the ex-FBI agent and the former head of the FBI in Knoxville, as her chief witness.
And why then, if that's the plan, does he bring the baseball bat?
Well, there's a lot of kind of conspiracy theories.
Involved,
I think he genuinely brought the baseball bat as a gift,
Right.
He's a very cold, he comes across as a very cold man, So like the first question the detectives had was, okay, well, like what kind of grandfather brings a gift for their grandson, but nothing for granddaughter? And Tom gave a second statement 10 days after the killing where he changes one little detail in it, and he claims that he also brought a tennis racket.
Okay.
So I thought that was very interesting that of all the things he could add in, this is the one thing he adds in, And
of course, after the arrest, he's very much taking control of those interviews, isn't he?
Yeah, and
as the FBI agent. But I suppose, just sticking on this point and what happens, how does she think she's going to provoke a violent incident with Jason, who's never shown violence to her?
Well, if you go back to what we talked about, where he says in that email, stop slamming down the phone, stop hitting out, stop pushing me, shoving me, right? What the detectives think happened on the night is, so Sarah says she had a nightmare. She woke up, she came down, and Molly went back up with Sarah to put her back to bed and change her sheets. And that Jason got angry when she came back down because he'd been woken up by Sarah. The detectives think that's true because they found the sheets that Molly said she changed exactly where they said they were. They think he'd had a few drinks that afternoon. He's woken up in the middle of the night. What's the first thing you do? You probably go to the bathroom, right? So he goes to the bathroom, and in the hallway from the bedroom leading to the bathroom, they found 2 clumps of hair and flesh, right? Now, Tom says he deployed the bat, and even though he's an FBI agent for 30 years, he missed entirely the brick. He could offer the detectives no information whatsoever on this bloody brick that was on the cream woolen carpet. But it would be the bathroom, the hallway leading to the bathroom is less than 3 feet wide. It would be really, really hard to swing a bat in there. And a bat would be less likely to take a scalp of parts of Jason's scalp from his head, whereas the serrated edge of a brick would be much more likely to do that. So they think he gets up, he goes to the bathroom. Molly, from what I understand from Jack, Jack says that Molly asked him to put this garden brick on her bedside locker 2 days before the killing. I think she hits him with the brick when he's coming back from the bathroom. Unprovoked. But she doesn't kill him. I don't think her intention is to kill him, but he doesn't go down because what's really interesting is like at the end of all of this, when Jason is dead over in the corner here, there are bloody fingerprints on the bedroom door. And the Martens, despite being in what they called a fight for their life, had no blood on their hands, no injuries. So those bloody fingerprints had to have come from Jason. I think the poor man was trying to escape. Tom says he's downstairs sleeping in the basement. The bedroom where it happened is immediately overhead. They hear Molly screaming in Tom's story. He grabs the bat he brought for Jason, runs upstairs. I think that's true. I think he came on the scene and then, who knows what happened from there, but maybe he was presented with the scenario of Molly's going to jail for a long time because Jason isn't dead.
Or there's blood and chaos.
And there's blood and chaos, and Molly has no injuries. What happens from there in Tom's story, he claims there's a big struggle with Jason, and Jason takes the bat from him, and Tom tells his story in the police station, which is really interesting because I've seen the video of his police interview, and he describes putting his right arm out to grab the bat when Jason swings it at him. But remarkably, there are no fingerprints on that bat, none whatsoever. And the forensics show that there were 25 hairs on the brick, which Molly claimed to have used once. 24 of them were Jason's, and there was one mystery hair on the brick. And the forensics found that hair, that mystery hair, was not Tom's, but it had genetic similarities to Molly. And the only other person in the house with genetic similarities to Molly was Sharon, who claimed to have
slept through it all.
Claimed to have heard her daughter screaming above her, seen Tom grab the bat and run upstairs. She knows her grandchildren are up there. She knows her daughter's up there. She knows her husband's up there in this so-called fight for their lives. And in Sharon's story, she falls back asleep. So the detectives never believed that, and they said in open court that they didn't believe it. The prosecutors didn't believe it. But they decided not to prosecute Sharon because it was difficult enough having two defendants. Adding another one would have made it too hard. So she wasn't prosecuted, but she was named by Jason's estate in a wrongful death suit as a co-defendant alongside Tom and Molly. And they settled that case out of court.
Right. Now, in interview, they sort of admit they've killed him, but not murder. It's this self-defense, and Tom Martens comes across very sort of aloof, and all those comments he makes around Jason in the interview feel a little bit pre-thought, including the dropping into it that he thought he kind of killed his first wife, and things like that. Molly is in another interview room where she's rubbing frantically at her neck, claiming that he tried to strangle her, and she's actually asked to take her hands down from her neck because it's the rubbing at it that's making some markings on it. Neither of them are marked, but they're ultimately brought to court to be tried, and they're found guilty.
Yeah, I think that's fascinating that Tom, if you look at his police interview and the transcript, one of the first lines out of his mouth is, Jason's first wife died in mysterious circumstances. The finding was she died of an asthma attack, but she actually died of asphyxiation. That's Tom's words. So
he kind of claimed her father had suggested that to him at the wedding, didn't he?
Yeah.
To the extent that the man wrote another statement before he died to say he hadn't.
It's remarkable that that's the first thing that jumps into his head when he's in a police interview, 3 hours after killing his son-in-law. Admittedly, he admits on the 911 call, I hit him on the head with a baseball bat. I may have killed him. He claims then, so they're never arrested on the night. They're interviewed voluntarily. They're never cautioned. They're driven back to the house and handed the two kids that they've just orphaned. And those kids are kept with them for 15 days. They're eventually, after 2 years, brought to court. They're convicted of second-degree murder and they get 20 to 25 years. But they appealed their case. And what they did was they used Jack and Sarah as the means of getting out of prison. The two kids that they had orphaned, Jack and Sarah made 4 statements during those 15 days where they alleged that Jason hit, pushed and shoved Molly. But the detectives were really struck by, remember, Jack was 10 years old, right? So I've seen this interview, the video of this interview, and Jack says, my father verbally and physically abused my mother. 10-year-olds do not talk like that. And, the detectives sensed immediately that, the kids had been coached, and the kids said they had been coached. But the appeals court in North Carolina agreed that the kids' allegations against their father should have been put to the jury in the original trial. So the Martens ended up getting out of prison. And there was huge publicity at the time. It was kind of in the middle of COVID, and you had Molly in her prison scrubs and her COVID mask, and Tom in his scrubs. So all of the media attention was the Martens have won their appeal, they're getting out of jail. But there was a single line in the court ruling which was really highly significant. They said, basically, the North Carolina Supreme Court said that Jason was the sole aggressor on the night, and the Martens were entitled to defend themselves. So just look at that, take Jason out of it entirely, and that's your father, your brother, your son, or whatever. He's in the States with his American wife. You get a call that, his wife and her father-in-law is in the FBI, have beaten him to death with a baseball bat and a brick, beaten him around the head 12 times, crushed his skull. They left that room without a single injury, no blood on their hands. And the Supreme Court of North Carolina says Jason was the sole aggressor and the Martens were entitled to defend themselves. So that's why there wasn't a retrial. The appeals court, they quashed the convictions, but they didn't vacate the original charges. So the Martens should have faced a retrial. But the district attorney saw that ruling and was faced with the situation, well, the only way I can challenge that finding of the Supreme Court is to put Jack and Sarah in the stand. And the Martens made it. There were secret negotiations went on for months with the Martens and the district attorney. And the Martens made it abundantly clear that if Jack and Sarah went into the stand, they would be rigorously cross-examined by the Martens legal team. And the Martens had spent nearly $750,000 on their defense. They were really very wealthy people. If they were poor black defendants, you would have never heard of this case again.
Yeah.
So Jack and Sarah found themselves in this extraordinary situation where they weren't just the victims who were orphaned by Molly and Tom. They were also the motive in that Molly set out from day one to get them. And then they were the instrument that the Martens used to get out of jail in the end.
Very tough on them, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Terrible. And of course, in the meantime, those 15 days that they remained with the Martens and before those interviews were conducted, there was also this frantic rush to the States by Tracy Corbett Lynch, Jason's sister, and she had to go into a sort of a custody battle with Molly. She gets the children, brings them back to Ireland. And in the time period between that and them going on trial, Molly Martens conducts a very strange Facebook kind of campaign. Did she fly something over the school in Limerick?
Yeah, Molly.
At one point?
Actually, I got access to some very interesting emails between Molly and her uncle, Mike Ernest. So people might remember Mike Ernest was Molly's uncle, but he became sort of the Martens' unofficial spokesperson. He was the person who gave all the statements to the police or to the media. But in these emails, Molly and Mike Ernest are discussing within days of the Jack and Sarah going back to Ireland, how they might hire a private investigator in Ireland to sneak a mobile phone to Jack while he's in school. They outline, that we have to do it while T and D aren't there. That's Tracy and David Lynch. They go to extraordinary lengths. They try to hire a plane to fly over the children's school with a birthday message for the kids. That contract was actually taken on by an American company, but an Irish pilot refused to do it. They then tried to hire or to take out a full-page ad in the Limerick Leader, wishing birthday wishes to Jack and Sarah. The Leader refused to carry it. They went on, I think it was Classic Hits FM, and Molly gave a live interview in which she asked members of the public to approach Jack and Sarah on her behalf. Remember now, she at the time hadn't been charged, but she was a person of interest, a known person of interest, and she was allowed to go on the radio and invite people to stalk these two highly vulnerable kids.
And had admitted in custody along with her father of killing him.
Yeah. And at the same time, the Martens, and I think this is a really fascinating aspect of this case, from within, I think it was 10 days of the killing, Molly's aunt and Molly's cousin go on Facebook and they start saying all this stuff about how Molly survived years of domestic abuse. Now, there hadn't been there were no reports to police.
No hospital visits.
No hospital visits. So it took the police and the prosecutors 2 years to get the Martens into court and get them convicted of murder. 2 days after the conviction, Molly and Tom feature on this ABC, which obviously is a big US television network documentary about the case, in pre-recorded interviews. And in these pre-recorded interviews, Molly describes being strangled 20 times by Jason, about, Jason forcing her into having sex and choking her during sex, and suggesting that she feared this was how Jason's first wife died. Now, there was absolutely not a single line of that in her police interview. In court, she refused to take the stand. And actually, when I looked at the entire transcript and all of the exhibits and everything in the 2017 murder trial, there isn't a single line about domestic abuse in there. So it took the police 2 years to bring it to court, and it took the Martens 2 days to destroy the man's reputation, not just claiming that he was a domestic abuser, but suggesting that he may have killed his first wife. And Tom features in that documentary saying, I met the father of Jason's first wife at Jason and Molly's wedding, and he told me that he suspected Jason had killed his daughter. Now, regardless of, any father hearing that, my daughter's getting married to this guy, and, his first wife's father just told me, I think he killed my daughter, you might do something about it, especially if you're an FBI agent for 30 years,
Sure. Yeah.
What does Tom do? Absolutely nothing. And then it was pointed out to Tom that slight problem with that, Mags, Jason's first wife's father, wasn't actually at that wedding. And Mags's father, who has since died, he went to a solicitor in Limerick and signed an affidavit saying that this was complete and utter nonsense.
Yeah, and had to do that, obviously. Where are they now?
Tom and Molly, eventually there wasn't a retrial. They entered into a plea deal. Tom pleaded guilty to voluntary manslaughter. Molly refused, even after months of negotiation, to utter the word guilty. She wouldn't say it. So she actually entered a no contest plea, which was the same thing in law. And they got 7 months in prison and were released in June of 2024. So they're both back living in Knoxville, Tennessee, and free.
And, the family here, and I'm sure the kids, and we've seen Sarah, and in particular, she has sort of forged a career for herself, kind of coming into media. She's singing and she's written a book, etc. They still have a lot to carry around, don't they? I mean, is it the absolute end? Can anything more happen, or do they have to just suck this up, that this is justice American style?
There's actually a significant twist in my book, which shows that, which proves that evidence was removed from the scene. And what I have done is I've been able to prove that the evidence was removed, and I found out where it went. Now, in any other scenario, that might be usually significant legally. But in the States, from what I understand it, there are only extremely, extremely limited circumstances where you can revoke a plea deal and basically put people back on trial to original charges.
Right.
But what I have discovered in the book would raise very serious questions about what the Martens actually did that night.
Okay.
As for Jack and Sarah, I first got to know them when they were 15 and 13, and they were 19 and 17 when we finished work on the documentary. And so I know that their teenage years were extraordinarily tough. And they really, really wanted to give evidence in a retrial. And in the end, they were limited to just giving victim impact statements, which were very powerful on the day, and were kind of redemption for them and redemption for their father, because they set out for the court that Molly was the abuser in the relationship, not Jason, that they were the victims of Molly. But that's the extent of their redemption, because there is no more legal avenues open to them.
Civil proceedings?
No more proceedings. Civil. Well, there is another thing that kind of comes out of the book is the lead investigator and the sheriff are both on the record for me saying we made a huge error in giving the kids to the Martens that night. They breached protocol, and they admit that they breached protocol, that the kids should have actually been put into emergency custody while the custody issue was resolved. As we mentioned earlier, Tracy had to come to the States. There was like 15-day period while the custody was resolved, even though Jason had decreed that Tracy should be the guardian of the kids. They were dragged through the courts because Molly wanted the US courts to override the will. But the lead detective and the sheriff say, we breached protocol, we made a huge error there. So there could be an avenue there. Whether or not they want to pursue it or not, I have no idea, where they could, sue the state of North Carolina.
And could they not sue the Martens for taking their father?
Well, see, they've already taken a wrongful death suit against Tom, Molly, and that's the one where they named Sharon as co-defendant.
Okay.
That was settled out of court. So that aspect of it is over.
That's over, yeah.
But there may be, and I don't know, there may be an avenue where they could sue the state of North Carolina for placing Jack and Sarah in that precarious situation for 15 days.
It's a bitter pill, isn't it? It's not.
Yeah, but
ideally, but obviously, if there was some suggestion that there was evidence removed from the scene, and if they were retried, that would be.
Yeah, I don't like. There won't. I don't think there's been maybe like less than a handful of cases where plea deals have been torn up and cases have been started again. From what I understand, talking to the detectives, that's not going to happen here.
Right.
The case is over. But like Jack and Sarah, it has to be said, they went through hell, but they're extraordinary, articulate, intelligent, well-rounded kids, have come out of this remarkably well,
And 32 million people, I think you said, watched the Netflix documentary in the first
28 days.
28 days.
Yeah.
That's a lot of people. And the book is obviously out now as well, here in Ireland, the UK, I presume. It'll also be published in the US. That publicity around and the story being told like that about Molly Martens certainly has opened a lot of eyes to who she is and what she's really like. Yeah,
I think like Netflix is an extraordinary platform. It goes into 190 countries or something. And there was, 32 million people watched it in the first 28 days. But as you know yourself, you can go into much more detail, much more, I suppose, forensic analysis in a book than you can in a 90-minute,
for sure,
film.
Yeah.
And the film, like when I pitched it first day to Netflix, I pitched it as the sort of emotional journey that these two kids had gone on because they were placed in this extraordinary situation where, they were made to damn their father and they, unfortunately they helped get the Martens out of prison. But they were used and, they were abused in that sense by Molly. A book can go into it, and my book is able to go into it in a much more objective way, looking at all the assumptions on both sides of the story, and I think it raises a lot of fresh questions about what actually happened in that bedroom on that night on August 2nd, 2015.
For sure. Well, Brian Carroll, thank you very much.
Thank you, Nicola.
I'm Nicola Tallant, and you're watching Crime World, a podcast about criminals, drugs and the underworld in Ireland and across the globe. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you can be the first to watch all our latest episodes. You can also listen wherever you get your podcasts.